Welcome to our podcast, Deep Dive, MTR Explores Subsea Technology. I'm your host, Rhonda Moniz, and this is your portal to the latest news on all things subsea technology. This episode is brought to you by the publishers of Marine Technology Reporter, the world's largest circulation publication serving the global scientific, defense, and offshore energy subsea market. For more information, visit marinetechnologynews.com. Hey everyone, welcome to this next episode of Deep Dive, the Marine Technology Reporter podcast. I've been looking forward to actually chatting with our guest today. John Fulmer is he's basically the lead technician on board the Falkor 2, which is the research vessel for the Schmidt Ocean Institute, which is doing incredible work. It's amazing. You see it in the news all the time. They're finding new species. They're finding new underwater mountain systems. It's just crazy the stuff these guys are doing. And I know any of my listeners from this podcast and other podcasts know my background is in diving, and as an ROV pilot, I worked with Bob Ballard and spent many months at sea with him as his actual first female ROV pilot, which I'm kind of proud of. And so I've really been looking forward to talking to John because I've lived this life. I've done a lot of this, working on a vessel similar to the Falkor 2. And so I've been really looking forward to talking to you, John. So welcome to Deep Dive.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you for being on. So let's get into it. A lot of times people will ask me, well, what do you do? Or what does a ROV pilot do? Or what is this? What is that? How do you do this? Or what does it look like? So today I'm hoping to kind of take the audience through what it's like to be on one of these amazing research vessels like the Nautilus or the Falkor 2. So let's talk about your responsibilities and the scope of your role. You're the lead technician on board the Falkor 2. And that's TOO, by the way, not TWO, for anybody that is wondering. And there's a story on that, and you should go and look up all of the information. You can watch these guys live. They do a lot of that stuff as well. They have amazing, telecom, and you can just go and watch what they're doing. It's pretty cool. But yeah, let's just start, John, with you talking about what your role is, what the scope of your work is, and what your role is as lead technician.
Sure thing. Yeah, so I'm one of two lead technicians at SOI. So I have an alternate. We do time off, time on. Right now I'm doing about 72 days, and then I'll go home for the summer back to Nova Scotia and kind of have some off time. But while on board, essentially I just act as the liaison between the visiting science party and the ship's crew and our shoreside staff that supports us throughout the expeditions as well. So what that entails is just making sure that the scientists have everything they need, overseeing the science department, which includes 3 marine technicians who are on the team. We have a multimedia technician who handles a lot of the live stream and ship to shores and other outreach engagements, and then a team of ROV pilots. So we have ROV senior supervisor, junior supervisor, and then a suite of pilots that we have on board. So those guys basically take care of Sebastian, our remotely operated vehicle, and we support that through telemetry, data collection, video analysis, data management, everything else that goes along with that. Yeah, so a host of different sensors that we have on board that we manage and maintain, not just operating, but if there are issues, we do a lot of troubleshooting, fixing things, different data feeds that the scientists might need, and integration of their software and their systems and sensors into the ship so that we can record it all locally and have multiple backup, and just doing data management, scheduling, mission planning, saying yes or no to the science party if they have wild requests. That's kind of the fun thing that we're able to do.
Yeah, I definitely. I remember some of those as well. And you're on, just so everybody knows, you're on board now. I mean, I know you look like you're sitting in your living room, but you're probably in a common area where people kind of like to hang out and, either get on their laptop or watch a movie or whatever, I would assume, right?
Yeah, so this is I'm in what is called the den. so that I don't have a living room as nice as this. It's something that the founders, Eric and Wendy Schmidt, kind of wanted to make sure the lab spaces are a lot more clinical and kind of and the app deck is obviously looks like an actual ship, but kind of a nicer feel up here that the science party can kind of get away and the crew as well, that we can hang out here, watch a movie, play some cards after shift. Um, but I've got a big sticker up on the window right now saying that it's reserved for some filming.
Great. Well, thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. So, how do scientists get on board, and how do you act as a liaison between the technical? I was an ROV pilot, so I didn't have to
Hmm.
deal with a lot of the things, obviously, that you deal with. I just got did things when I was the pilot when you were on watch, you did your job as the pilot, and there was always a lot of work even when you weren't on watch to do.
Hmm.
Always things to fix, always things to fabricate if you needed a new tool or something broke down. We were before we got on the podcast, John and I were talking about um, when things break down or you need a scientist requests some sediment sample or some whatever it might be, and it's a different kind of area and you might not have the exact type of tool to collect that sample, whatever it may be. You got to make it right on board. You have to fabricate it
Yeah.
right on board because you're at sea and you can't, as John said, which I thought was funny because I always say the same thing, it's not like you can run down to Home Depot. So, but that's a lot, that there's a lot going on. So there's the technical crew that's really busy, the ROV pilots, the engineers, there's the people that are involved in the multimedia, there's the scientists that are there for various legs of the trips, doing their particular science at that particular time in that particular location. How do you keep all of that together?
Yeah, it can get a little bit tricky, but we have morning meetings on the bridge every morning, so the heads of the different science teams come up. We'll have our multimedia correspondent who's kind of documenting and getting all these great shots and highlight videos for us. They're there as well, and then the captain, some of the other bridge officers, the chief engineer, our AVIT specialist, and then the head of the purser, who's the head of the interior department. So we all kind of just go over what's happening that day and give people a heads up that the water's going to be off between 2 and 4 while they do some work on the RO plant or something like that, and um, or we'll be doing different deployments at different times of the day, and just making sure that the different departments have the crewing available and staffing so that we can meet the objectives. But a lot of it, there's a ton of pre-planning that goes into it. Our shoreside team does a wonderful job of kind of working with the science party, getting them ready before they go out. And we have 6 month planning calls, 2 month planning calls, and 1 month planning calls. So we'll do that while we're on the ship as well. So I'll have to run off and join these meetings sometimes, and just kind of tried to identify anything that's fallen through the cracks. I mean, got a pretty solid system of what is and isn't possible, of what depths our different systems can operate at, what speeds we can transit at while we have different things deployed, all that kind of stuff. So the logistics are more or less ironed out, but I mean, things change on the fly all the time. If there's a new discovery or if we go down at a certain waypoint or a station and the scientists don't see what they're expecting, then everything can kind of change within 12 hours, 6 hours. We're off to a different spot. Or if we're mapping and we find some features that we weren't expecting to be there. So we kind of, it really is a thinking on your feet kind of thing. But I've got an amazing team of everyone from every single department that's on the vessel, um, all really working a concerted effort to make sure that things run as smoothly as possible because it's a lot of resources to have a ship out at sea, as you know. Um, and more to the point, the scientists that are visiting, some of them, this might be a culmination of their life's work to this one expedition where they're the chief scientist, and whether it's their first time as a chief scientist or maybe their last cruise as a chief scientist, we want to make sure that we're not wasting anyone's time and that we're maximizing data for effort. And then also in the same vein that the integrity of the data is at the highest level that it can be, that everything's calibrated, that we're not missing anything, triple checking stuff, sanity checking other people's work, having people check your work. So yeah, it's kind of a constantly moving engine, and you get a little bit of downtime when you have the opportunity, but otherwise it's pretty much full tilt from the moment we leave the dock until we get back.
Yeah, definitely. And so one of the other things I was thinking about too was that I was curious about what systems you also have on, because you're working with different scientists, right? You're working with marine
Hmm.
biologists, you're working with geologists, you're working with all these different scientists that are there to collect their specific data while they're
Hmm.
on board. What systems go? I want to get to Sebastian, of course,
Yeah,
because I'm being an ROV pilot. I'm going to totally geek out. But
yeah.
before we do that, I wanted to ask you what are the systems you have on board the Falkor 2?
Well, we have a gondola. Falkor 2 originally was an offshore construction vessel for wind farms. So I used to make the analogy when we were in the shipyard that it's kind of turning a house into a restaurant, that you can't just put a bunch of seats in there and a kitchen and kind of get the same results. So when we were in the dry dock in Vigo and Galicia in Spain, we had a gondola installed to accommodate the first installation. I haven't checked up recently, but we're the first ones who have the zero point 0.5 by 1 degree EM124 multi-beam system. It's a Kongsberg system, and it's full ocean depth. We can get pretty incredible resolution out of it. The range resolution obviously isn't as good as lower or higher frequency systems, but we have the 124. We have an EM712, which is higher resolution for shallower water, and then we even have an EM2040 that's on there for more coastal work. Um, then we also have single beam echo sounders. We have an EK80 system for fisheries observations. Um, we have ADCPs for current profiling. So we have two of those at the moment. We have a Workhorse 300 and an OS 38. So that gives us kind of shallow water, deep water current profiling, and we compute that through the University of Hawaii UHDAS program and have them do a lot of the real time processing for it. And then we have our USBL system for acoustic positioning of all assets that are in the water. So either Sebastian, currently we have three separate deployed systems. We have a mini drifter, which I can kind of see at the window um, just on the horizon there. And that has some systems that we deployed this morning. We have our CTD that we use a beacon on to track the exact, well, as close as we can, exact location as opposed to just using layback calculations. And then we have another system deployed out of the A frame. So kind of keeping track of where everything is, all the depths and positioning. We have our GNSS systems. We have two redundant systems for science surveying. So we have a Kongsberg CPAT 380, and we have a PAWS MV or Anaplanix PAWS MV system. Both of those have their own MRUs, the motion reference units, and we use Fugro high precision marine star correction. So we can get up to 4 centimeter accuracy from that, and then the total propagated uncertainty of the acoustic positioning and of our seafloor mapping, just trying to give the most precision and accuracy that we possibly can to the georeferencing of all of this stuff. Because if we don't know where it is, then it's not very useful to put it into a database for people to use years to come. We also have a underway seawater system, so we have fluorometers, transmissometers, pH and thermosalinographs to measure temperature and salinity and everything else that we can from the water coming in from the surface. And then we have our CTD, which is a seabird carousel with 24 Niskin bottles to do water collection at various depths. And the CTD has a suite of sensors similar to our flow through system. We have transmissometer, fluorometer, turbidity, photosynthetic active radiation sensor, conductivity, temperature, density, which we can use to pull out sound velocity profiles. What else do we have on there at the moment? And we have some visiting scientist equipment installed on that right now, doing fine scale dissolved oxygen. But we also have our Seabird micromolar sensors on there as well. And then topside, we have our meteorology sensors. So we have uh, wind speed, wind direction, temperature, humidity, dew point, radiometers, more power sensors, and a rain gauge as well. So we collect all of that data and send it off to NOAA and to SAMOS. So if you check on Windy, one of the weather stations will be Falkor in the coming days here, as we still kind of iron out the details after refit and getting out right back into science. I know
So
that's a
you have a
mouthful,
couple
but
of
that's it.
things.
Yeah, a couple of things.
You have a couple of things on board, just
Yeah,
a couple.
and we haven't even gotten to
um,
Sebastian yet.
well, that's next.
Yeah.
So so it's interesting because well, yeah, and you guys that's quite the vessel from what I understand. You have so obviously you can you research full ocean depth,
Hmm.
and you obviously have an array of tools. And when you're working with scientists, and I know the other thing I wanted to mention too was you also are, which I think is really cool that you guys do, is you also work with I know universities and some of my colleagues that have had new technology that they've gone out on board the Falkor to test out their new technology as well.
Hmm.
So that's, I think, a pretty cool thing too, that you guys do as part of some of the research. So let's talk about Sebastian because obviously I love ROVs, and Sebastian's obviously very large, large work class vehicle. Could you talk a little bit about what is on Sebastian?
Absolutely, yeah. So Sebastian was designed and built in-house. I believe it began in 20 late late 2014, and the first dive was 2016, just a year before I joined the company. Um, so it's rated to 4,500 meters. It's a tethered vehicle with an umbilical that sends down fiber ops for comms and control, and then electrically powered to go down to the hydraulic motor that runs on board for all of the thrusters and the manipulators. Um, we have two 4K cameras on there. I believe at the moment we have five additional HD cameras, just for situational awareness and just getting different perspectives, because stereo vision is definitely a luxury when you're trying to pick up small little samples with a giant Schilling T4 arm.
Right.
We have we have a suction sampler, so we can go in, and if there are little critters or organisms or anything else, sediment samples, we can use it's like an underwater vacuum, and then we can index through the different jars with different size meshes on the bottom to kind of collect and sift through stuff there. We have six Niskin bottles on there, which the ROV team rigged up a really cool setup where we kind of have bicycle brakes, the brake lines on these little paddles that are 3D printed on board. You can just kind of reach across and tap with the starboard arm and fire the Niskins. Um, and
That's pretty
that's
cool.
for water collection. We have two separate CTDs. We have the Seabird FastCap 49, which derives sound velocity from the conductivity, temperature, and density, and then we also have a UVSVX from Vailport that has a sound velocity sensor and then derives the salinity, temperature, and density, and the sound velocity, and then you derive the salinity from that. So having different measurements and different derived values, and those match up. When they match up perfectly, then that's just another vote of confidence that you're getting the accurate data instead of just having two redundant sensors that are measuring the same thing. We have three separate depth sensors on there. We have a pair of scientific digicords. We have a mini IPS that's connected to our Sprint INS, so the inertial navigation system, and our DVL, Doppler velocity logger for bottom tracking, which also with the new firmware upgrade is doing ADCP data as well. And and then the depth on our two different CTDs. And then two USBL beacons. One is a transponder, one is a responder, and those are Sonodyne beacons with our head, which is an HPT 7000. If anyone really wants to geek out on all the technical details. and all the model numbers we have. But then we have the two vertical thrusters, one lateral, and two port and starboard at the very aft of the vehicle. That way, we reduce any blowout with sediment and stuff. If we're setting down and if we have to thrust forward or thrust aft, then we can kind of lean up against a cliffside or what have you, and don't disturb too much of what's in the field of view. And also, if we're going to be collecting any octocorals or anything else that's very delicate, that we're not flowing around and kind of washing out the screen. I quickly think what else we have on there. We have a whole bunch of different science junction boxes, so we can integrate different systems like a mass spectrometer that we've had out recently, magnetometers that have been deployed there, other hyperspectral cameras, synthetic aperture sonar systems, and we also have a Kongsberg M3 multi-beam system that's on the aft of Sebastian, which is kind of a like an upgraded forward-facing sonar. Oh, and we also have the Blue View forward-facing sonar actually up forward, for any collision avoidance, and then sometimes if it's just completely awash with sediment, we can keep an eye on any rock formations we might be coming across, or being able to see a little bit of the landscape
Right.
ahead of what the field of view is with our 300,000 lumen light system. So
Wow.
it gets really bright down there.
So there's a couple of things on Sebastian too.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Yeah.
room for expansion. So everything is pretty modular. We can add or remove different flotation panels and blocks. So if we front load, then we can put a little bit more flotation up in the forward section. And if we have heavier stuff aft, we can account for that as well. But Sebastian is always slightly positively buoyant. So if we ever lose power, if there are any issues, he will always float back to the surface on his own eventually.
As the blue economy grows globally, Marine Technology Reporter has the world's largest audited subsea audience. MTR offers insights and analysis from researchers, innovators, and thought leaders in ocean subsea commerce, defense, and academia. At MTR, we always stay one step ahead. For more information on how you can stay on the cutting edge, go to www.marinetechnologynews.com. Now, are you using Sebastian? I know you're off the coast of Chile, and your studies are centered around the oxygen minimum zone and researching the data, collecting data on that. Are you using Sebastian at all in any of the work off of Chile?
Not on this particular expedition. The first station we were at was about 1,000 meters deep, but the main oxygen minimum zone was at 500, and then about 150 meters depth. And then we've headed out a little bit closer to the Atacama Trench, which gets about as deep as 8 kilometers, I think. Sorry if that's not in freedom units for some of your listeners and viewers, but
That's
you guys
okay.
can yeah, you can Google it.
I think most people, the only reason I know meters is because of working in the marine technology,
Yeah.
my career. Otherwise, I think people that work in this industry, they use that more than anybody. So yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're collecting data for that, you don't necessarily need to be using something that like Sebastian. But I was wondering if you were doing any other research while you're there that you were using, the ROV for, or
Not this
any
particular
other
one,
type
no.
of, yeah.
Oh, sorry. We will be. I think we have day is it today? We have 9 more days of this expedition, and we'll be heading back into port in Antofagasta. We have just under a week to do demobilization, some maintenance, and then mobilize for the following cruise, and that will be a purely ROV and mapping cruise. So our Facebook and YouTube streams, and schmidtocean.org will have live streams every single day of all of the ROV dives live in real time for that. Um, and there should be some really cool stuff there if people want to check out the website and kind of see what's coming up, and a little synopsis of what that cruise will entail. But this one, we were thinking, without Sebastian going in all the time and having to monitor all this stuff, it might be a little bit more relaxing. But yeah, there's always when there's any downtime, we find a way to fill it with more science because that's the best use of the resources and the capabilities of the vessel is just to is kind of
Right.
to push it, and we're out here, so let's not waste any time. Let's utilize all of this. So yeah, it's pretty much been
Oh,
nonstop.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, absolutely. That's one cardinal rule is you need downtime to rest and everything, but you're out there to work and do the
yeah,
research and for the most part, I found everybody loves what they're doing, so it's it doesn't everybody's looking for the next thing or you know oh, I have something I wanted to get to over here and now some downtime, so I'm going to use it for that. But
yeah.
talk a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about how live streaming, you guys utilize live streaming as well in
Hmm.
your missions. And, I think that's really important for public engagement and education purposes and, communicating the science that you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you do with that, with your live streaming?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think live streaming is kind of the unsung hero. The outreach efforts that are made. I like to say that outreach keeps the lights on, because having engagement with people, not only are you inspiring the next generation who wants to come out and just seeing um, how accessible it is, and the different people from all walks of life that are out here. Someone might connect with a particular story or individual who's out at sea, and be inspired themselves to follow that career path. Um, but also just educating the public or anyone on where some of their, if there are tax funded grants that some of these scientists are coming out with. Schmidt Ocean Institute is entirely privately funded, nonprofit philanthropic organization, but a lot of the scientists that we have come out, they might have funding from the National Science Foundation, um, or anything else of the different institutes that they work for in academia and otherwise. But just educating people on the importance, why we're out here, how cool it can be. Something is kind of seemingly drab as oxygen minimum zone. I mean, the videos that are going to be coming out in the next couple of weeks that Alex Engler, our multimedia correspondent, has been putting together are just absolutely incredible and riveting. And the passion that the scientists that are out here have for this and the implications for um, climate change research and everything else, really is kind of, it's inspiring just to get that perspective, and you can kind of get excited about something you never thought you'd find interesting. And then just the beautiful imagery, the pictures, that's all great for having desktop backgrounds and that kind of thing. But just the importance of how all of these things interact, and then being able to engage with the public and have ship to shores where there's an elementary school and they're asking really interesting questions that you're kind of surprised to hear coming out of 7 year olds. And yeah, and just having the ability to be able to share what is happening out here and really important work that's being done, that otherwise might not be reaching people's living rooms or onto their computers or their phones or whatever they're consuming the media through.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's such a valuable um, live streaming, especially. It's such a valuable thing to be able to share that, and especially in real time, so
Yeah,
that kids can see what's going on, and it inspires them to be involved in STEAM. Now it's STEAM. It involves
yeah,
to get them involved in STEAM programs and to really think about that as a career path. I think it's such an amazing tool. We did that on board the Nautilus as well, and there's just so much value in it. You can't really. Uh, it's amazing. I think it's important work, and actually that leads me to one of the question that I wanted to ask you earlier on, but I got so geeked out with the tech. How did you? Oh my god, how did you get involved with SOI? Tell us a little bit about your background.
um, well, I did a completely different undergrad. I never did marine biology or engineering or anything, but I found myself kind of um, paying off student loans by working on sailboats in the Caribbean and the Mediterranean. And then I thought,
That's not bad.
yeah, it wasn't too bad. Uh, but I figured I couldn't really see myself doing that year round or for the rest of my life. So I ended up going back to school and doing a marine geomatics program at the Center of Geographic Sciences in Nova Scotia. After a friend of mine was like, "Oh, you should do this. It has a science background, and you get to be in the ocean." I was like, "Well, that's kind of using my head and being able to be out at sea is a lot better than just kind of squeegeeing up really nice teak decks and stuff." Even though sailboats are still a passion of mine, but so I went through that program, which was an incredible program. And then out of that, I started working in a research lab with Dr. Craig Brown at the Applied Oceans Research Group. Craig Brown actually was able to come out for one of the Galapagos cruises at the end of last year, but I was home for that, so I didn't get to sail with him, but and then we had a bunch of industry partnerships, collaborative research agreements. We were working with the Department of Fisheries in Canada, helping define new marine protected areas, doing habitat suitability mapping, a ton of work with QPS and CARIS for their backscatter processing, um, and then with different multi-beam systems. So there was a lot of research and development, and then actually going out and testing these things. So I really got exposed to almost everything I could possibly uh, want to be exposed to. And then I was at a point in my life where doing a PhD or something was it just seemed like more school. I'm ready to make money now, so I'd like to pay off some of the debt that I already have, so not incur more. And it's actually kind of a really funny story because my oldest friend, one of my best friends, Tig McManus, was an officer on Falkor Classic, we call it, but the first Falkor, which is now Gaia Blue out of Italy. If anyone wants to check that out, they're doing some great stuff there with the old vessel. Um, so
Oh, cool.
yeah, so Tig was on here, and another friend of ours, Luke McNutt, who's a second officer on board here now. Um, they started working, and then when I finished school and I was doing all this research stuff, a temporary marine tech position came up. I applied for it. They vouched for me. I think they're a little bit more straight laced, very serious officer types, and I'm a little bit looser, so I don't know if they got exactly what they were expecting. But it seemed to work out because I worked my way up through the ranks after a couple of years, and now Tig is the captain of Eric Schmidt's expedition vessel Legend. So he's kind of still in the family. Um, and so the Nova Scotians just started growing on board. Um, we've got a couple others who live in Nova Scotia but are not from there who are on board now. So there's something in the water there, I think. Um, and yeah, just through the research programs that I was involved in, just kind of, I guess, when I interviewed, I had all the right names and all the right systems on my CV, and it was kind of a shoe in at that point.
That's awesome. Well, you're obviously the right guy for the job.
Oh, thank you.
So you are obviously you're off the coast of Chile right now, and you're studying the oxygen minimum zone.
hmm
And can you tell me first, before I ask you the next question, can you tell me why a little bit about that research? Why is that important?
Well, I'm certainly not the best person on board to talk about that, but we have a
In
cool,
general
yeah,
terms,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, we've got a cool program on board that we call Seminar at Sea, where we get the scientists to kind of give a half hour to an hour lecture essentially on their portion of it. So all the different team leads will kind of give an overview, and um, I had an understanding of why we were working on this, but after some of the talks, it's really opened my eyes to how much more important it is than I originally thought. So these oxygen minimum zones, there are several of them around the world, like in the Bay of Bengal, off of Namibia, um, and then this one in particular is one of the oldest and largest. So it's an area in the ocean that is completely anoxic. So we have some like world class bleeding edge technology sensors on board right now, and they are measuring nanoscale, nanomolar, um, near absolute zero oxygen in these areas. So there are different
Wow.
microbial communities and stuff that are still living and processing nitrates. and other chemical processes to stay alive. Um, but the wild thing is that these oxygen zones or these anoxic regions are growing. So they're getting deeper and shallower at the same time, and they're expanding closer towards the coast and further offshore. Um, so they don't really understand why they're growing. And obviously, with ocean acidification and with phytoplankton being the number one oxygen creator on the planet in the ocean, much more than what people might have you to believe of about the Amazon rainforest or anything else. It's the ocean that's the lung of the earth. So it's kind of important that we kind of get as many baseline studies on this and understand what's going on in these hypoxic areas. Um, but then they had some theories of maybe there were just areas. This might be water that's kind of left over that hasn't touched the atmosphere in as long as 2,000 or 3,000 years, because these areas, there's some upwelling coming from the Atacama Trench, and just so many unknowns about the implications that a growing oxygen minimum zone might have on the entire ecosystem or the interactions of the entire ocean and the planet as a whole. So it's yeah, a lot more interesting than just a zero on a sensor. I learned the other day.
Right, right. I know it's amazing actually. It's important work too,
Hmm.
and that's why I wanted to make sure that I asked you about go back and ask you about that because I was interested in that in the current leg of your expedition. And your legs last. What are they? Each leg is about 2 weeks.
No,
Oh, I know they vary,
yeah,
but
yeah,
on average,
yeah. So they
yeah.
all vary quite a bit, but geez, the most
So you've been there how long?
losing track here. This is a
I
five
know
week
it's easy to
expedition.
do.
Yeah, this one's 5 weeks, so we're in
Oh, this one's
yeah, so
okay.
we're at the tail end of week three at the moment. Um,
Yeah.
am I? Yeah, no, we're at the beginning of week five. So every day is a Tuesday when you're at sea. Um,
I know. It's hard to explain to people, but it's true. It's like they wait. What day? What day is
yeah,
it today? I know.
I haven't slept in
It
a
does
couple
run
months, so
together.
yeah,
Yeah, yep, yeah. And you're on different watches. When you're on different watches, it's tough to get a sleep schedule as
yeah.
well. Um, so where are you guys from here? When you're wrapping up this leg of the expedition, where do you go next?
We'll be heading back to Antofagasta. So we're just off the coast of
Hmm.
Iquique, which is also in Chile. So we'll head back down south. It's only about a day's steam. Um, and we'll go into port, and then the next group that comes out will be working even closer to Antofagasta than we are right now. Um, so there are a bunch of other sites that they'll be looking at. We'll be going down with ROV Sebastian to check that stuff out and do a little bit of mapping. But there's so much work that's been done in this area recently with the Atacama Trench and the fault line that's there, and just tsunami studies and seismic sensors and geophones and hydrophones and everything that they've installed in the last 10, 15 years. So there's not a whole lot of mapping we can add to it, but we'll try to do a little bit more higher resolution stuff in the areas we go to. But yeah, we'll be very near, I think, just outside of 12 nautical miles for the most part.
Right. So if we have any listeners, because we have college students or people that are thinking about maybe getting into this for a career, because a lot of what you guys do, you bring on board a lot of young people,
Mhm.
and they may be kind of trying to figure out what it is that they are focusing on or want to focus on, and what trajectory they want to take or career path. If you were talking to somebody that was interested in doing something like this for their career, what advice would you give them?
Um, we get that question quite a bit because, I mean, we'll have undergrad
I
scientists.
would
Yeah.
imagine.
Um, we'll have
Yeah.
some students that come out and they're a marine biologist or they're um, a chemistry major or something, and then they kind of see different work in action and they're curious and they might want to switch career paths or something. But I mean, I had a background in hydrography and in mapping, um, but there are just so many different ways that different skill sets can really benefit the work that we do here. It's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none situation, but that's a good thing. Just being able to adapt. Living at sea, it's an unusual lifestyle. So it's not for everybody, but I mean, having 2 months off at a time is a pretty amazing feeling to be able to plan backpacking trips or camping or just travel in general. But I think having an
Right.
appetite for going out of some level of kind of drive and determination for discovery and just being involved in these really cool things is a very important part of wanting to be here, I think, first and foremost. Um, and then as far as training, computer programming is becoming a really huge asset. I think the quote is AI is not likely to take your job, but somebody who uses AI will. Yeah,
Right. Yep.
so that kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, Being able to just a lot of troubleshooting, fault finding, just using the logic of, well, this isn't working and just tracing it back. So some electronic abilities of just being able to wire stuff up, being able to use, being comfortable with computers and being able to adapt. A little bit of engineering know-how of a lot of physics goes into a lot of the stuff that we do, especially the hydroacoustics. Um, uh, yeah, just essentially the big thing is just being willing to learn. There's a lot of stuff there's so much on the job training that happens here. I mean, I can't even begin to explain all the stuff that I thought was just so impossible to get my head around when I first started in this industry, and now I'm kind of teaching other people how to use different systems. Reading the manual is really your best friend of just reading it front to back. And if someone says we do this because this is the way we've always done it, that's a horrible attitude to have. If there's a reason to change the way we're doing things, and I can't make a good argument as to why we shouldn't, then we're going to start doing it that new way, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. But I think advice, getting back to the actual question you asked, advice to anyone who wants to get into this, um, just trying to get out on the water with any local groups or anyone. A lot of places might have volunteer programs, or um, they might have either trade schools or community colleges or universities that have programs where you can go out and do some summer work. Make sure that you don't get seasick before you commit to a career on the ocean. Um, that's I've seen some people make that mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, there's just such a range. If you're into multimedia, if you're into computer programming, like I said, if you're into electronics and coding, and kind of machining things, of even 3D printing, I can't begin to explain how many times we use that even on this cruise alone, of different pieces and clamps and adapters and everything else that we might need. Like you said, we can't just go to the store and buy these kinds of things. So, um, and then obviously having a background in marine biology or physical oceanography or chemical oceanography, um, and yeah, just kind of a willingness to learn as much as you can while you're out here and just kind of soaking everything up. Um, and if you finish shift, some people just go straight to bed, and obviously, in certain circumstances, that's the the obvious choice to do. But then we might finish, and then you just wander into the labs and ask one of the scientists, like, "Hey, what are you doing there? Like, what's this flow through cytometer that you've got running here with all these lasers and crazy things?" So it's a constant learning environment, and just kind of doing your best to put yourself in those situations where you can kind of build skills that you never know what's going to come in handy when you're out here. Um,
Yep.
so it's yeah, I know that's a pretty vague and broad answer, but
No,
yeah.
actually, I think it was a good no, I actually think it was a good one because you're right. There's no one thing. There's so much going
Mhm.
on a research vessel that's out there. It's such a dynamic atmosphere that's so liquid. It's constantly changing. Things are happening, things are breaking down, things need to be fixed, things need to be changed, things need to be built or I mean, and there's just so much that's going on all the
Hmm.
time, and it affects everything. There's so many different jobs on the vessel, and you end up learning a lot about a
Yeah.
lot. You definitely do. So I think that was actually a really good answer, and you need to. I think that's why environments like that are so valuable, not just for the work that's being done and the dissemination of that work, but also for the people
Hmm.
involved, because you learn, especially for younger people that are going on something like the Falkor 2. You learn so much. It's almost like you get like a trial by fire
Yeah,
kind of thing,
absolutely.
because you learn so much, and it's everything going on, and you're just like and you're on a vessel in the middle of the
Yeah.
ocean, with a bunch of people.
Almost
So
literally being thrown in the
it's
deep end.
I exactly, exactly. And it's, you just gotta just sink or
Yeah.
swim. That's it. And and most people I've seen, they swim.
Yeah.
So, and it's a really cool thing to be a part of. I mean, I'm really proud of the work that I've done, in similar to what you guys are doing, and in some of the stuff that I've been able to experience. I'm really, really grateful for. So, I think that was a really good answer and a really good description of it. So I guess one other thing I'd like to ask you is, what as far as the Falcor 2, what do you see going forward? As far as future work and advances in technology. What do you see for the
Well, I
future
think,
of the Falcor 2?
well, there's a possibility that we'll have a couple more vehicles on board at some point going forward. Um, so we've had a bunch of visiting AUV systems out. We've had um, the Imbari people with their Dorado AUVs out several times. Um, and then we've had some synthetic aperture sonar systems installed on Sebastian to do really incredibly high resolution mapping. Um, so
Yeah.
we're hoping to expand our program, but obviously these things take time. We're kind of growing into the vessel, just feeling out what makes the most sense for this platform. Um, but to have more autonomous vehicles, to really, like I was saying earlier, just maximize the platform that we have, because the places that we go, generally people only go there for science research. It's not a conventional shipping lane. It's not a very nice place for someone to sail through if they're just leisure sailing, because it's out in the middle of nowhere, like the Mid Atlantic Ridge or the East Pacific Rise or something like that. Um, so these are rarely visited places. So to make sure that we can do as much with the time and resources that we have while we're out there as possible. If we have an AUV going off and mapping an area in high resolution with a mass spec on the nose or a oxidation reduction potential system on there, while we're doing sample collection with ROV over on the other area. And then when the ROV comes on board, we do some more shipboard mapping or we do some CTD water collection. Um, Everything going on at once, just to make sure that if there's any downtime, that's kind of the thing that keeps me up at night. If there's downtime, then what are we missing out on? What could we be doing to maximize the
Right.
potential here? So just more assets there, which is difficult because there are limited berth spaces. We want to provide as many bunks and cabins for visiting science parties, but it kind of gets into a law of diminishing returns. If you have so many scientists, there's only, I mean, we have a massive laboratory space. We have a main lab, a wet lab, a hydro lab, a cold lab, a dirty wet lab, a robotics lab, the mission control, the computer electronics lab, the seawater lab, all this stuff. The entire main deck is for science. And then we have a massive aft deck with container spaces. But but all of that kind of gets limited if you don't have enough cabin space. So it is kind of finding that balance.
And you also have an artist at sea
Yeah.
program, which I think is pretty unusual. Yeah, it's really cool though. I mean, now that's why I said earlier it used to be STEM and now it's
Hmm.
STEAM, because I think that's amazing. And you guys have that too. You have an artist at sea program. Could you talk a little bit about that? I wanted to ask you about that
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
well.
That's honestly, it's one of the cooler things that we do here. just, I mean, the live streaming, the outreach is so incredible just to be able to have an ROV dive where one of the chief scientists who very well may be the world's leading expert in the thing that you're watching on the screen, and you can ask them questions in real time. But in addition to that, you have an artist experiencing and kind of being right in the action with all of the scientists and all of the ship's crew and everything that's going on, and they're experiencing this thing through their own perspective as an artist, and they're able to interpret that and um, produce art in various different mediums that might be like a pixel art video game or this super cool painting that's behind me here, or video installations, or music, or sculpture, or other mediums. Some scientists, when they come on, they're like, "Oh, wait, I have to carve out some lab space for someone to do some sculpting." But then by the end of it, I think everyone that's ever been on is they see the beauty in it, um, and having another, I guess, another way to express the data, um, kind of
Yeah.
really it's another way to engage people in the work that the scientists are doing, and then just the crosstalk when you hear like the scientists and the artists kind of chatting about ideas for different things, and the scientists are able to become impassioned and explain what they're doing because the artist really wants to understand it so they can give an accurate representation. And those are some of the coolest conversations to be at when we're sitting in the crew mess having dinner together or something. So they also take all of the pieces. They might do a series of work inspired by the crews, but there'll be one that will go into a collection and travels around with all the other art from all the expeditions that we've done, and goes to different museums and different art shows. So it's another way to engage with the public. But I think the coolest part about it is just to have the science party get excited about their data being interpreted in an artistic way.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
That's absolutely amazing. That's really cool. And it's innovative,
Yeah,
I think is a good
yeah.
word. It really is. So if somebody wanted to get more information on, you know, the Falkor 2 and SOI and all that, where would they go?
So schmidtocean.org is the website, and you can follow the live streams on Facebook and YouTube. And every single expedition we do, even if there isn't an ROV in the water doing the live streaming, we do open houses sometimes where our multimedia technicians will give a tour of the ship and interviews with the science party, and kind of you get to see uh, a live stream of what's going on the vessel in real time, and then also all the different socials. You can check that out. But we will still be doing weekly highlight videos, and artist profiles, and science stories that our multimedia correspondent puts together. And um, they really are like it blows my mind what they can pull together in a week at sea, working the same kind of hours that we're working. You just look over and they're just there burning the midnight oil to edit the final video or to kind of translate some of the interviews, because obviously we're working off Chile, so we're trying to do a lot of engagement with Chilean students, with schools, with museums, and with the public. Um, so you can check those out. I think the latest one went up a couple days ago, but I'm not sure when this podcast will come out. But there'll be plenty more, and you can go back through the history of everything, and you'll probably see me on there in a couple of them.
Another thing I was thinking about too is the amount of data you guys
Hmm.
are collecting. You have so much data, mountains of data you're collecting all the time. Could you elaborate on the data management life cycle aboard the Falcor 2 on these
Absolutely,
expeditions?
yeah,
Like from initial data capture to the final analysis, how that works, that
yeah. So we
flow?
have on board we have a data aggregation system, OpenVDM, which is open source. Shout out to Webpinner. We also use OpenRVDAS, a research vessel data acquisition system, and Enflux database. So we pull everything in. We have an incredible shoreside support team for that. Kareen Basson is our data architect, and then our shoreside coder programmer is Carol Rice. So we work with them in setting up all of our sensors and we record shipboard into this database, and then using Grafana to visualize a lot of it, just makes life so much easier that we can have all these screens up in the office or around the ship, either for visualizing data for scientists to kind of keep track of, but a lot of it for us in the science department to kind of monitor the different values that we're getting. We have redundant sensors everywhere, so that just doubles all the data that we're getting. But the big one that we end up having to wrangle with is the ROV video. So the 4K video, that's kind of one of our main deliverables when we have the ROV in the water. It's a massive data set. It's incredibly valuable because all of this imagery can be used later in machine learning, annotative software. It can be used for generations to come. So we want to make sure that all of that is captured accurately and preserved safely. So we have multiple backups around the ship. We also actually use the Google Transfer Appliance, which is essentially a giant encrypted hard drive, um, that we have 300 terabytes on that. So we'll fill that up and then ship it off to shoreside, and we'll upload all of that to the cloud. And I think one of the most incredible things about the Schmidt Ocean Institute is that the founders have pretty much one mandate, and that's all of our data is completely open source. So some of the scientists that are on here, they'll get a little bit of a head start so they can get their papers published and everything because it's their work that we're publishing. But we offer the services of the vessel in kind, and the only thing that we ask for in return is that the data is completely available to the public. So even if some of the data or the papers might end up in paywalled peer-reviewed journals or something, Schmidt Ocean will assist in paying some of the fees for that, so everyone can get to it. Um, but having different QC on the data, being able to review, go back, step back through if one sensor deviated from the others during a certain time, then we can flag that data and make sure that when it gets uploaded to the database shoreside in its final resting place, that all of the metadata associated with every single sensor we have on board is intact and accessible for people so that this data can be used, like I said, years to come. It could be someone's PhD program or their PhD thesis in 5 years' time. They could dig through the data that we have, and you could extract enough from the different locations that we go to or the different depths that we're working at, and formulate something. So being the stewards of that information is something we take very seriously, and that's a surprisingly large amount of our work, is just ensuring that the data is uncorrupted, and that we're keeping an eye on every little sensor that we have on board.
Yeah, such a massive amount of data. I would imagine that's a huge
Yeah, and if
undertaking.
we get more systems on board, like if we're processing AUV data with much higher resolution mapping stuff, or if we get other cameras on, or if visiting science party members have, if we're recording their data shipside instead of on their own systems, then that kind of increases quite a bit. So we can have a 3-week cruise with upwards of 40 terabytes of data easily, and that's growing every day as kind of higher frequency data recording systems kind of evolve and are brought out on the ship.
So let's talk a little bit about what are some pivotal sensor integrations on Sebastian, things that you find indispensable or things that enhance the research
I
capabilities.
think the most valuable tool, other than Sebastian itself, and the modularity of that system, is the event logger that we use. We use C-Log, so all of the shipboard sensors and all of the vehicle sensors, using Influx database that we have for collecting all of the information. We can make an event in the logging system, and all of that metadata will be collected, kind of a timestamp placed on it, so we can go back through time. There'll be screen grabs from the video sensors or the video cameras that we have running, and then some really cool uh, some really cool features that we've kind of added in over the years. When we go in the water and that CTD kicks on and starts measuring the sound velocity of the water, as we go down to 4,000 meters depth or something, the acoustic positioning beacons that we have, the USBL, we can take that body of water that Sebastian actually traveled through and then extract a sound velocity profile as soon as it hits the bottom, just by hitting a button instead of having to go and pull the data out and process it or what have you. And then we load that into Ranger
Right.
2, our Sonodyne system, and our tracking of the vehicle just becomes so incredible, because not only are you getting the depth, but the actual path that the vehicle travels through is likely the exact distance from the ship, or at the same angles as the ship. So the ray tracing that we get through there with the USBL just gives insane positioning, and it's pretty cool to be able to have that, and then to be able to go back through all of the events that we have. If there are really cool pictures, anyone on the ship can pull their phone out. If you're sitting eating dinner, then you can take a screen grab and you can download it later, or right there on your phone if you like. Yeah,
That's pretty
and then
cool.
yeah, and
Yeah, that's
everyone on
pretty
the ship
cool.
can kind of use that. So we'll have um, like the incredible team of fitters that we have on board that machine stuff, fabricate things in like the blink of an eye when we ask for something. Um, they'll see something in the crew mess of the live video footage, and they're like, "Oh, I want to see that picture." Or like they can go through the notes that the scientists have put up. Um, so everyone on the ship has accessibility that way. And we're going to be launching the shore-based version of that as well, so that it won't be in real time, because we have to push all that data back shoreside because it's these massive files. But the scientists can walk off the ship and still be able to go back through all of their notes through the event logger that way. So it's something we're trying to grow out and build things to make life as easy for scientists, and just something where they can feel that they're not going to miss out on any opportunities once they get back ashore, that they'll have access to everything in kind of the same way that they got used to when they were on the vessel.
Wow.
And that's open source as well. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so John, I want to thank you so much for being on Deep Dive and chatting with me today. As I mentioned to you earlier, I was really looking forward to talking to you because it was a number of years that I worked on a research vessel like the Falkor 2, and so it was a little nostalgic for me to be able to talk to you today, and I do miss some of that. I was really looking forward to hearing what you guys are doing. Plus, you guys are doing such
Yeah.
cool stuff. It's amazing, and it really is with the science work you're doing, the stuff with the ROVs and other systems and sensors, and you know just to hear about that stuff, and also the Artist at Sea program. It's all just really cool work, and so I was looking forward to this. So thanks, John, so much for
Well,
being
thank
on
you
Deep
very much. It was
Dive.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
This episode of Deep Dive was brought to you by the publishers of Marine Technology Reporter. Interested in being a guest or a sponsor for Deep Dive? For more information about this podcast and many other opportunities for your company to stay informed and in the know, go to marinetechnologynews.com. And as usual, hit like and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. See you again on the next Deep Dive.